Help me welcome the chair for this session, Mr. Klaas Wirenga. Klaas? All right. In Ghana, there's something that we say that we call it sankofa. Don't try to pronounce it, right? Sankofa means if you miss something, it doesn't hurt to go and pick it up. So I've missed something, I'm picking it up. Now we are excited to have a new sponsor on board. Everything was settled today, and it's a silver sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Naseni from Nigeria. That is our silver, one of our silver sponsors. Please put your hands together for Naseni of Nigeria. All right, and we recognize all other sponsors, especially the platinum IY. All right, class is ready. Class.
Yes, thank you very much. It's me again. The idea of this session is that you will be the ones talking. So maybe prepare already a bit for that. We have 4 excellent speakers that will explain how they contributed to the advancement of federated identity, but it's really to stimulate your thoughts. Let me speak for my situation in Europe. What we've seen in the last, well, maybe already 20 years, but mostly in the last 10 years or so, is that the network is not the differentiator anymore. And I realize very much that that is in this region not yet the case, but I took off and have become an indispensable part of science and education. When you are looking at big science experiments, scientific collaborations, programs for student mobility like the Erasmus program, you will see that more and more the emphasis is on how can we facilitate this by having a good trust infrastructure in place. And that is what we've been building, and that is increasingly what makes us as an NREN community, and as soon as possible get to that same stage. I also said already when talking to others that let's also be honest, it's not that we are done in Europe. We see pretty much the same sort of problems that you are seeing as well. So really for me the purpose of this session is to see how we together can come up with ideas on how to move forward and maybe tackle some of the problems that are arising. So please prepare your questions that you may have. Please think a bit about what it would take for you to embrace this set of technologies and embrace federated identity in your environment. And also this is of course also in a way everything you've always wanted to ask about federated identity but were afraid to ask. If you have questions, also don't hesitate. We have an excellent panel here that no doubt can give their input on all of that. I think we are 1 hour and 10 minutes over the original starting time. Olmo has kind of threatened to drag us off the stage if we take too long. So the goal is to stay roughly within an hour or so. I'm now asking also the panelists to do their short presentations really as short presentations. So let's just ask you to briefly, less than 1 minute, introduce yourself the moment you get up to the stage. Well, I learned that I have to do ladies first, so let's stick with that. Lombik, can I ask you to come up and tell us about ORCID? And maybe an applause for Lombik when she comes up.
Yeah, I already introduced myself, but my role is Grant Program Officer and Engagement Lead. Next slide, please. So yes, orchid at a glance. So this was taken in February 2023.
I think this one is going to test it and see if it works.
Okay. Oh, perfect. It's working. Thank you. So this is orchid at a glance. Like I said, it's a global research infrastructure organization, and it's an independent not-for-profit which is open to participation by all. So this map here is really a great representation of where ORCID member organizations and consortia are. Excuse me. As you can see, we only have one consortium in Africa, which is in South Africa. All the others are in different parts of the world. So America, that's North America, South America, and some in Australia as well. And when we're looking at the member organizations, that's the blue. We have some in Kenya, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Botswana down there. So as you can see, it's quite widespread, but Africa still needs quite a bit of work, and that's a big reason for why I'm here today. So if you look at the yearly active records, that's over 9 million. And this was taken in February 2023. So I think we can still do better. So we're guided by our values and founding principles, and we're also committed to making fair, open data available using our public API as well as the annual public data file. Thank you. So yes, in terms of our vision, excuse me, ORCID's vision is a world where all who participate in research, scholarship, and innovation are uniquely identified, and so basically everyone who participates in research, scholarship, and innovation are uniquely identified, and they're connected to their contributions across disciplines, across borders, and across time. And in terms of our mission, this tells us how we're going to get there. And this is by us enabling transparent and trustworthy connections between researchers, their contributions, and their affiliations by providing a unique, persistent identifier for individuals to use as they engage in this research or the scholarship and innovation activities. So ORCID, what is an ORCID basically? ORCID is a unique persistent identifier which is free of charge to researchers. It's a 16-digit number, and this is what we call an ORCID or an ORCID ID. The second service that we provide is an ORCID record or a digital CV, which is connected to the ORCID ID, and that can include different aspects, including employment, education, funding, peer review, research output, as well as other metadata. And lastly, we provide a set of application programming interfaces, which is APIs, as well as the services and support of communities of practice that enable interoperability between an ORCID record and other member organizations. So what's this thing called a PID? What is a persistent identifier? This is something that is globally unique. So each PID resolves to one entity, and this could be a data set, it could be a person, it could be a journal, an article, a project, or even a book. But basically, they uniquely identify things. A PID is also persistent. What does this mean? And this is the P in PID. Persistent identifiers stick around. They're not reassigned, they're well governed, and they're also technically resilient. So they're stable and they're also reliable. Also, they're resolvable by humans and machines. So this means that they're findable, they're accessible, they're reusable, and also interoperable. Why? That's a big question. Basically, PIDs provide clarity. Exactly which book, which person, article do you mean? PIDs prevent confusion and solve this problem well. And a very good example that we give is for people who have multiple names, or people who change their names when they get married, or there are all these different situations where it's easy to confuse things, especially here in Africa where There are so many L Tembos or LT Shumas, but basically the PID is going to provide clarity as to who exactly did specific work or who to attribute work to. Also, PIDs facilitate sharing, reuse, and attribution. They make it easier for researchers to discover and give attribution to authors, organizations, and funders in publication and reporting. Also, PIDs enable automation and interoperability. Sorry about that. So automation saves time for both the researchers and the funders. And it's basically it helps to disseminate information, it facilitates trusted exchanges, it enables aggregation and removes transcription errors. So there are PIDs for many entities, and in the early days we talked about people, places, and things. And for instance, if you're looking at PIDs for people, it would be ORCID or Scopus ID or ISNIs and other IDs. And for places, we had Ringgold and ROAR and GRID. And for things which are articles, data sets, books, etc., we had DOIs, ISSN, ISBN, all those different PIDs. But now we also include PIDs for grants and also for projects. So for grants, we have Crossref grant IDs, and for projects, we have RAID. So these are just different PIDs which are specific to a specific thing. So PIDs are connected. We can't run away from that fact. And as we can see from this graph, underlying metadata means that systems can exchange information about entities and link them together across infrastructures. So for instance, as you can see from this graph, grants can be connected to PIs, peer reviews can be connected with papers, data sets can be connected with data management plans, and people can be connected with works. I hope this is clear, but I'm just going to explain it real quick. So basically, ORCID facilitates the automation and reuse of PIDs. So what you can see there is an example of, it's a screenshot of someone's what the landing page looks for an ORCID record. And as you can see on the far left, that's other IDs. So if that is your ORCID record, you could include other IDs that are that can be connected to your name or to your ORCID record. And on the right, you have place PIDs, you also have thing PIDs. So everything there is then connected, and ORCID then facilitates that automation and reuse with the PIDs. So each PID provider stores metadata about their primary object and metadata about linked objects. So just like I explained earlier, there's Crossref there's DataCite, and there's ROAR. And those are the specific PIDs. Depending on whether it's people, places, things, grants. So that's basically an explanation of the primary metadata and the secondary metadata that is linked to these specific PIDs. So PIDs can make research fair. So basically we are linked to these FAIR principles, so which is basically findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So yes, now I'm going to talk a bit more about how this is all linked into everything else and why ORCID is here. And it's basically about increasing global participation. Global participation is one of the 4 themes of our strategic plan towards 2025. And for this reason, we came up with what we call the Global Participation Program. So in particular, when it comes to the adoption of ORCID in underrepresented regions, the desired outcomes are that we are able to help researchers in the global south to increase their visibility and claim credit for their work. Also, what we want to do is to improve funder, publisher, and policymaker understanding of the contribution and the impact of researchers in these countries. We also would like to improve the ability of academic institutions to better understand their global collaborations and also to benchmark their performance against others. And how do we plan on doing this? So what we're trying to do is to foster the development of communities of practice in low and lower middle income countries by adapting ORCID's existing national/regional consortia model. And we also want to work with local partners who can build understanding and use of ORCID in local contexts. And lastly, we would like to target specific technical integrations that will drive adoption of ORCID in underrepresented communities. So the Global Participation Program has a two-pronged approach to achieving this goal of global participation. And one of these is the Membership Equity Program. And basically, this is a discounted membership fee structure for consortium members. So for low-income countries, it's an 80% discount. And for lower middle income countries, it's a 50% discount. And all of this is according to the classification of the World Bank. So that's what we follow. And also we have a lower threshold of 3 members for the initial year, and thereafter it can go up to the 5, which is the minimum number of members of a consortium. The Membership Equity Program is fully funded by ORCID. On the other hand, we have the Global Participation Fund, and we have 2 grant programs under this. This is the Community Development and Outreach Program and the Technical Integration. I'm also very happy that 2 of our grantees for the very first cycle are actually here. That's EcoConnect and UVCI, and I'm sure they'll speak on their own a bit later. So the GPF was actually made possible by the generosity of ORCID's founding lenders, even though the admin costs are funded by ORCID. Also, I should add that our second cycle is opening on the 3rd of April, so please follow our socials. Okay, so in terms of the focus communities, I spoke about how it's low and lower middle income countries. And so up to date, the ORCID participation has been low, as we saw from that map, which is quite gray, especially for Africa. And that's something we're trying to change. So in terms of goals, I think I've mentioned this already, but basically we're just trying to increase the global participation, especially in these low and lower middle income countries. Let me just get that. So the structure of the program supports a diversity of grantees to spread the risk and increase the chance of positive outcomes. So we have 2 grant cycles per year, and like I said, the first one for this year will be opening from the 3rd of April to the 3rd of May. We release about 5 grants per cycle, and the funding award per grant is between $5,000 and $20,000 US. And there are also some grantee benefits which are very specific to this program, such as dedicated ORCID staff contact, invitation to participate in the ORCID grantee forum and community, invitations to grantee community events, invitations to ORCID virtual and in-person events, and also inclusion in ORCID's ongoing communications program. So we are currently in talks with WACREN, especially with regards to a new regional consortium initiative. So what we're trying to do is to serve the global research community through national level consortia. We understand this is difficult to implement in some countries, but what we're trying to do is to have many different countries, but who are part of one region, being a part of a regional consortium. So what we're doing with this is, like I said, we're trying to increase the adoption of ORCID for these countries. So this will be open to organizations from higher education, nonprofit, and government research and funding agencies from countries that are part of the focus community. And a regional consortium needs to include organizations from a minimum of 3 countries within the defined region. And lastly, a regional consortium should consist of at least 5 members during the initial formation year and no less than 10 members from the second year onwards. So that is actually still in the works. So when you talk about the road to a Western Africa regional consortium, what does this take? What we would need is a lead organization, and we're thinking, WACREN could be well suited for this level of engagement. And also it requires members. And are these members in this room today? I guess we're yet to find out. So more information on the specifics of a consortium, including the tiers, which is the pricing tiers, can be found at info.orchid.org/membership. But I'm sure these slides will be shared and there'll be more information that you will find there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for, let's say, one question. We are a bit pressed for time. So are there any questions? If not, I have a question for you. Who of you does have an orchid? Okay, you still have work to do, I guess.
I hope next time I'm here we'll have everyone raising their hands. Thank you.
So next up we have Brenda Namuli from RENU, where they're doing amazing things with Eduroam. So I'm happy that she came to tell us all about that. Can you put Brenda's slides up?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Brenda Namuli from the Research and Education Network for Uganda, and I will be discussing about Eduroam on the go, which is roaming anytime, anywhere. So the objectives for the Eduroam on the go solution was to cover the connectivity gaps that we realized as RENU after the post-pandemic era. So,
Can we have the slides up? That sounds like a no. Okay, maybe you can just start talking a bit about it and I'll go find out about the slides.
It's all right. So what, maybe I could just give a brief background about what RENU has been doing in the Eduroam space. So I'm proud to say that RENU was the 75th national roaming operator, and we registered in the year 2016, and between that period of 2016 to 2020, we deployed various strategies to ensure that institutions actually take up the service of Eduroam and they can actually use it. I could mention that the strategies that we deployed were, one, that we could go directly to these institutions and put teams in place, and the purpose of the teams was to actually teach the people that are in the institutions how they can actually use the tools and the services that are being used at these institutions. And at the end of those programs, there is a baseline of what should be established in the institution after the programs are done. And I would say one of those services is supposed to be Eduroam. Sorry. Okay, so like I've said, we were and we still are the 75th national ping operator. Then the second strategy that I would talk about is workshops. So with workshops, we usually have these yearly, And in a year, we could hold, let's say, a minimum of 3 workshops. And the aim of these is to train the users that are supporting the institutions so that they can easily maneuver the tools that have been deployed at these institutions, but also be able to maybe troubleshoot the services that the institutions are using. And with other engineers, that is internally in Uganda and externally out of Uganda, RENU also forms core engineering teams with the members of the institution so that we could learn from each other and we could share information and collaborate and see how we could support these institutions. So those are the different strategies that we deployed to have institutions use the ADRM service. But during that period, I would say it was a period of 4 years when was only able to connect 18 institutions on the ADRM network. So before the pandemic, that was what happened. So when the pandemic hit, we saw an increase in the number of institutions that were joining the ADRM service, and I would say we have connected over 100 institutions now in a period of 2 years. And what have we done differently from 2020 to 2023? We as RENU have made different deployments around ADRM, and one of them is Metro ADRM. So during the pandemic, there was also a country lockdown that was enforced by the government. So this meant that everyone was supposed to work from home. Students were supposed to study from home. So this boosted the need for internet connectivity, which in turn boosted the need for Metro ADRM. So what Metro ADRM is that instead of this service being limited to on-campus settings, we are now pushing it out to metropolitan areas. I would say an example is like a cafe. So if someone walks to a cafe that has an ADRM hotspot, they can actually connect to the service. So in this way, we were increasing the reach of the ADRM service, but we are also telling the institutions that this is something that you could benefit from. And the strategies that we used then to increase the uptake of the Metro ADRM service was that we were and are still using the infrastructure of service providers that are already in the market, and we just have an agreement with them that this is how our service is supposed to be given out to our member institutions. And recently we've been holding marketing campaigns. So we know that, yes, the institutions exist, but our actual users are the students of these institutions. They are the staff for the institutions. So marketing campaigns are helping us reach out to these users and tell them that this is how you're supposed to use ADRM service. This is how you will benefit from this service. And then we rolled out something called Managed IDP for institutions that could not have the capability of hosting their own radio servers or their management systems for their users in their campuses. So what RENU does is that it takes all this burden of hosting the radio server, of hosting your user management system, and it does that for you. All you need to do is just add your users, and those users will be able to access the ADRM service. So we've seen many schools, that is primary and secondary schools, take up this service because mostly this is for their benefit, for the benefit of schools. And so, like I've said, there was a country lockdown, so this meant that staff like me had to work from home. So RENU also decided to deploy institutional staff home links. We call it staff home links. So this way we are putting ADRM in the residences of the staff. And this is not just limited to only RENU staff, but to staff of the institutions. Then, of course, there is EDIUM on the go, which we are discussing right now. So what is EDIUM on the go? So I would say in brief, EDIUM on the go, like you see on the screen, is just a portable device that is capable of broadcasting the EDIUM SSID. And this device should be capable of WPA to enterprise. So I believe for all of us that have used or that have deployed the EDIUM service, we know that in order for any device to broadcast EDIUM, it needs to be able to allow WPA to have WPA2 authentication. And so like I've said, this device is portable, which means you can move with it anywhere. And that is the whole idea, is that since we are not making assumptions that learning is only restricted to campus settings or learning is only going to stop at homes, but even if someone is on the road or is moving from, let's say, one region to another, they're supposed to be able to access internet. So the whole point of EDIUM on the go is to cover those gaps, that if someone is not in a metropolitan region where there is an EDIUM hotspot, or if someone is not at home, or if they are not on campus, how are they able to access internet? So that's where EDIUM on the go comes in, that I can move with this device from where I am to where I'm going, and I could still be able to be connected. So how is the implementation of EDIUM on the go? Sorry. Okay, so this is just a technical illustration of how EDIUM on the go was implemented. So first you have an EDIUM on the go device, which is capable of broadcasting the EDIUM SSID. And inside this device, we have a cellular SIM card, and this SIM card is capable of doing 4 Mbps up to 8 Mbps. And so the device subscribes to a cellular provider tower, which connects directly to the cellular provider network. So inside that cellular provider network, RENU was able to register its own private cellular access point network. So RENU has a private APN in the service provider network. So that integrates directly into the RENU network. And if we are to talk about how EDIUM works, so of course in the RENU network we have institutions, and these institutions have users that are using these devices. So if they are trying to connect to EDIUM while using the EDIUM on the go devices, of course all their requests are going to go through the Radius proxy server that we as RENU host. And these requests are routed back to the federation level servers. I don't think I have time to explain how federation level servers work, but let's continue. And of course the federation level servers reroute you back to your home institution, and that's how you're able to access internet. So that's just a brief understanding of how the deployment is. If we are to look at the statistics, we see that so far EDIUM on the go occupies 0.9% of all the access points that have been deployed in the country. And out of those 0.9, each AP is able to register at least 598 successful logins and register at least 34 unique users. So of course we see that it occupies a smaller percentage of the access points that have been deployed, but it registers at least more users than other deployments because of how flexible it is. Since people are moving, if let's say I'm moving from my home to where I work from, That means along the way I could be registering users instead of someone that has maybe their hotspot at their homes. That means it can only be accessible from their home. Someone has to walk to that residence in order to access Edium. But if I have my device and I'm moving with it, I don't know who I'm registering, but along the way, I might be registering users. So what benefits have we seen with the Edium on the Go service? So we have seen an increased demand for the Edium service. Of course, institutions want to be able to be onboarded onto the service. Increased bandwidth capacity. The whole point, maybe I would say the marketing strategy that RENU deployed as a way of making institutions take up the Edium on the Go devices was that each device is attached to that institution's capacity. So we don't want to see the institutions limited, because even if you are to acquire the devices and you do not increase your bandwidth, users will be constrained, there would be performance issues. But since the devices are directly attached to the bandwidth, that means if an institution increases by a certain amount, there is a certain number of devices they are supposed to acquire. So there is that increase in bandwidth capacity uptake. Then, of course, with these solutions we've deployed, we've seen the government trusting the NREN more. And one of the things I would say that has happened because of that is that government is now contracting RENU to connect primary schools that are in upcountry regions. Then, of course, there is growing NREN membership. So we have institutions that only come to RENU because they've seen what we've done in the Edium space and they want to be part of that. Of course, there is increased demand and public demand and partnerships. Then, of course, our members or institutions can now clearly see what's the difference between an NREN and an ISP, because previously they would say you're an ISP because you're just providing us internet, but we are providing more, we are giving them other services that ISPs are not providing. Then, of course, with the solutions that we have had, we've had the opportunity of getting grants out of this. And then there is portability and unlimited access because of how the device is. And then, of course, someone always has full-time access to the internet. The challenges that we have seen and are still facing at the moment is that there is capacity limitation by service providers. So like I said, we have an APN with the cellular service providers, but they can only give us a maximum of 8 Mbps per SIM card that is added to the Edium on the Go devices. So we believe that is still a limitation. International roaming, so of course this solution is so far still limited in Uganda. So if you are outside Uganda, you cannot actually use it. But we are hoping that NRENs can come together with the ISPs that we are in contact with, so that we could allow international roaming, in that even if I am outside of my country, I'm not limited and I can still access internet. Then there is limitation in the cellular network coverage. If you are in Uganda, you might find that in some remote areas, you are unable to get any cellular coverage, which means you can't use your device. So what is the future and what are we looking at? So right now, we are unable to monitor the quality of service. We don't know if users are actually getting the best out of this service. So that is something that we look forward to having in the future. Then of course we want to scale the EDROM on the go deployment. We don't want Ugandans to be the only ones that are actually benefiting from this. We want other regions to also be able to access this, and that is through international roaming. Okay, so I have a testimonial video. I don't know if they could play this. Sorry. Pardon?
Who's that ugly guy there? Otherwise, I can do the testimonial. I carried one of the EduRoam on-the-go devices with me for a week when I was in Uganda, and it's wonderful. It's really fantastic, and it's really great to see these things happening in Uganda. And one thing that I said then, and I will say again, is I cannot give you tomorrow terabit connectivity. What I can tell you is there's nothing that stops you from starting right now on these kinds of things. So this is a call to action, if anything. I think in the interest of time, Brenda, we have to stop it here. Go and talk to her if you want to know more.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I think actually the nightmare of every presenter, no slides, that Brenda deserves an extra round of applause for going through that. Are there any questions about this? Do you have a mic? Brenda, you're not getting off that easy. You have to answer a question.
Just a very, very simple question. Very interesting presentation. I was just curious, who finances the devices for RENU? Is it RENU financing it itself, or how do you finance the devices?
Oh, thank you. Okay, so like I had previously said, that in order for an institution to actually acquire the device, they have to increase their bandwidth uptake. So there is a limit that maybe per 5 Mbps you're getting these many devices. So it's actually the institutions that are financing these devices alongside RENU.
So, two things I want to know. The first is, what is the capacity per SIM? Because you explained that you are using APN. So, what's the maximum allowed? And also, just give us a sense of pricing. Pricing, how much? That is, if it's not a secret. Okay.
Thank you. So the capacity per SIM is that the minimum is 4 Mbps and the maximum is 8 Mbps. That's per SIM. So we have the 2 APNs at the moment, okay. One for 4 Mbps and the other for 8 Mbps. Okay. In terms of pricing, is this pricing of the devices?
Okay, so is it a bundle, the device plus the SIM, or is there an option to take, so for example, if I have a dual capacity device like this, can I just take the SIM and plug it in, or must it go with the MiFi device?
It has to come with a MiFi device, but it's bundled, they are not separated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And if I can add something to that, because I asked the exact same question when I was in Uganda. One thing they successfully did was kind of play the mobile operators against each other. First one didn't want to, the other did, and then when they started doing it, and then you get into a nice situation.
Okay, so we have a similar situation here, and that's why I'm very interested. Only one telco is prepared to work along with us. The others see us as possible competition.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in finding out the business case, how did you persuade all of your telcos to come on board? That's very interesting. And if you have any lessons to share, you can share them now, or probably we can do that in.
Yes.
I would say not now, later, please. In the interest of time, we had one more question, and then we go to the next presenter.
Brenda, Sten is my name, from Samren, Zambia. I want to find out in terms of cost-benefit analysis with the effort that you are trying to put in. How is it? Are you getting some good revenue out of this?
So I would say that Renu is not really making money out of this. We offer Ethereum as a free service, and offering the Ethereum on the Go devices looked like an expense that Renu would incur. So the whole point of having it leveraged on bandwidth uptake is so that Renu doesn't incur extra expenses in manufacturing the devices, but also the institutions aren't constrained as well. They see the benefit that if I am increasing my bandwidth, in a way I'm getting the devices, but I'm also increasing the performance of my internet. So Renu isn't really making money out of this, I would say.
Go and find Brenda in the lunch break or afterwards.
Thank you so much.
And a third applause for Brenda. Next speaker, and I think almost getting nervous by now already, but next speaker is Mamadou Bakwan. Can you come up to the stage? And can you put the slides up as well? Sorry? On the slide. Oh. Just start introducing yourself.
C'est bon? Ok. Donc moi, bonjour à tous. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Voilà. Donc, je suis docteur Bakwan Mamadou, enseignant-chercheur à l'Université virtuelle de Côte d'Ivoire. Je suis également le directeur du système d'information de l'UVCI. Voilà. Donc, notre intervention va porter sur la fédération d'identité en Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, bon, mon slide n'est pas encore prêt, mais je vais continuer. Donc, pendant cette présentation, il y aura un certain nombre de points que nous allons voir. Et parmi ces points, nous allons mettre le focus sur les actions réalisées. Voilà, donc nous allons vraiment passer du temps à parcourir les actions qui ont été réalisées, les actions en cours et les actions à venir. Ok. Donc, il faut noter que la Côte d'Ivoire a entamé depuis quelques années la transformation digitale de son administration. Et cette transformation digitale est basée sur un certain nombre d'éléments, dont la fédération d'identité. Donc ici, la fédération d'identité représente un élément clé de cette transformation digitale. Donc, il y a eu des ateliers à Abidjan. Nous avons organisé un certain nombre d'ateliers à Abidjan pour réfléchir sur la mise en place de cette fédération d'identité. Et à l'issue de ces ateliers, nous avons réussi, avec la collaboration et l'accompagnement du WACREN, à mettre en place une plateforme de gestion même de la fédération d'identité en Côte d'Ivoire. Donc aujourd'hui, nous avons une plateforme qui nous permet de gérer cette fédération d'identité. Donc la plateforme est accessible via le lien reader.eduid.africa. Donc aujourd'hui, nous avons un certain nombre de structures en Côte d'Ivoire qui sont déjà enregistrées sur cette plateforme. Nous avons une dizaine de structures qui sont déjà enregistrées. Et ces structures-là ont la possibilité de gérer leur base de données. Ça veut dire quoi? Ces structures ont la possibilité d'enregistrer les utilisateurs, apporter les modifications nécessaires et leur permettre, par exemple, d'accéder aux services associés à la fédération d'identité. Donc, parmi les services qui ont été déployés, il y a le projet Profer. Profer est basé sur une plateforme de cours en ligne qui regroupe des plateformes de forums, des bibliothèques en ligne et une scolarité qui est gérée en ligne. Donc aujourd'hui, à partir de la fédération d'identité qui a été mise en place en collaboration avec l'équipe WACREN, nous arrivons à accéder à ces services-là. Donc ce service a été déployé au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire. Donc comme les actions à venir, donc aujourd'hui nous sommes plus orientés vers la demande d'adhésion à la fédération continentale et du ID Africa. Ensuite, nous allons nous pencher sur du ID Again. Voilà. Donc aujourd'hui, ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est que nous avons pu mettre en place cette plateforme en collaboration avec WACREN et cette plateforme fonctionne correctement. Donc nous sommes maintenant au niveau de la sensibilisation des autres structures, donc les structures de l'enseignement. Aujourd'hui, par exemple, nous avons l'université virtuelle qui est enregistrée sur cette plateforme. Nous avons l'université Félix Houphouët-Boigny qui est enregistrée sur la plateforme. Nous avons l'INPHB qui est enregistré sur la plateforme. Je vais essayer de défiler. Donc, voici la plateforme dont je parlais. Donc, cette plateforme est accessible via le lien reader.eduid.africa. Donc, à partir de cette plateforme, nous arrivons à gérer toutes les identités. Donc, il y a la procédure d'inscription qui a été validée. Donc, pour les structures demandeurs, il faut créer un compte sur cette plateforme et derrière, on vérifie l'identité de la structure. Et après, si l'identité est confirmée, nous validons la demande d'adhésion de la structure. Donc, une fois que la structure adhère à cette fédération-là, elle a la possibilité maintenant de paramétrer son espace de travail. Donc, ici, la structure a la possibilité de préciser le nom qu'elle veut choisir. Ici, par exemple, nous avons des exemples. L'exemple de l'UVCI. L'UVCI, c'est l'Université virtuelle de la Côte d'Ivoire, donc en abrégé UVCI. Donc nous, on utilise uvci.reader.eduid.africa. Il y a Félix Houphouët-Boigny, l'Université Félix Houphouët-Boigny qui a son espace de travail. Il y a l'INPHB qui a été enregistré. Il y a l'Université Nangui Brogwa d'Abobo qui a été enregistrée. Il y a l'université Alassane Ouattara qui est enregistrée. Il y a le centre de calcul qui est enregistré sur cette plateforme. Donc, au niveau de l'UVCI, nous avons ajouté un certain nombre d'utilisateurs. Donc, ces utilisateurs-là ont leur login et mot de passe qui leur permet d'accéder aux ressources qui ont été mises à disposition comme des services. Donc voici un peu les structures qui ont été enregistrées dans cette fédération d'identité. Donc tout à l'heure, je parlais de Profait. Donc la plateforme Profait a été ajoutée comme service. Donc à partir de la fédération d'identité de la Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons accès à ces ressources-là. Donc voici l'interface de la plateforme. Donc il s'agit d'une plateforme de formation en ligne en énergie renouvelable. Donc il y a également une plateforme de gestion de forums qui est associée à ce service-là. Donc, comme je le disais tout à l'heure, les actions à venir, donc il s'agit, nous sommes au niveau de la demande, par exemple, d'adhésion à la Fédération continentale EduID.Africa. Ensuite, nous travaillons sur Edu Game pour être membre de cette fédération-là. Donc, voici un peu présenté toutes les actions qui ont été réalisées au niveau de la Fédération d'identité de la Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Are there any questions?
Good day, Doctor. How many users do you have on your platform?
Comment? Ok. Pour le nombre d'utilisateurs, nous sommes allés par structure. Pour chaque structure, aujourd'hui, nous avons au moins une dizaine d'utilisateurs qui ont été enregistrés. Voilà. Donc, au niveau de l'UVCI, nous avons 11 utilisateurs qui sont enregistrés. Donc, c'est pareil pour les autres structures.
L'année dernière, on était tous en Côte d'Ivoire et on a vu qu'il y avait EduRoam dans vos bureaux principaux. Quand
Oui.
est-ce que vous allez déployer EduRoam à travers la Côte d'Ivoire? Merci.
D'accord. Donc, concernant EduRoam, il faut dire que EduRoam a été déployé à l'Université virtuelle de Côte d'Ivoire et à l'Université Félix Houphouët-Boigny. Voilà, donc, pour le moment, ce sont ces deux structures-là qui bénéficient de EduRoam.
No more questions. I don't see any hands. Then thank you once again.
Bon, ok, merci.
And that brings us to the last and of course not least speaker, Owen Ioa. And
thank you, Klaus.
You would like slides as well, I guess.
Can I have my slides ready, please? So I'm Owen Ioha. I work for EcoConnect Research and Education Initiative. We're an NREN operator in Nigeria. So today I'm going to speak about a journey that EcoConnect with our users has gone through in using EduID. I see different people here, and so your roles within your campuses and networks will vary, but at some point you have or will be using some form of education identity to access services and resources. And EduID as an infrastructure or an identifier that every person who works within the research on an education community is going to need that in order to be able to access all kinds of services and resources. So it's become a very important infrastructure that we all need to use. And there's some excellent banners actually in the foyer that I think we should all look at to gain some familiarity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're using EduID and the role that Bonafide, which is an identity and access management platform, how we're trying to deploy this as a REN, Research and Education Network service. Right. So, sorry about the slides. There's a lot of text, but the background to EduID is essentially that with digital transformation, there are lots of applications and services that are emerging, both within the campus networks and in the cloud, and just basically the ability for users to access these resources, remember different usernames and passwords is becoming very challenging. And in addition, there are service providers. These are people who offer services who want to be able to give access to their platforms or provide services to the research and education community in a way that they know that these users who are using the resources are known and trusted. And so essentially, the ability to identify who our users are, enumerate who the users are, to establish different kinds of business models as to how maybe some of these solutions can be paid for or accessed freely if the business model requires, becomes very important. And so that has really driven the case for having identity, education identifiers for users, or EduID. So what had happened, particularly in the African region, we'd had challenges that we needed to address, and over the years, WACREN and the other regional RENs, Ubuntu Alliance and ASREN, came together within an Africa Connect project to develop a trust and identity framework so that we could actually have what we call identity federations. These are federations that will allow our researchers, students, and academics to be able to access services, global services as well, that they can use in their practice. So in the initial phase, the regional RENs were able to come together and build this framework called EduID.Africa, which we kind of refer to as a catch-all federation, so that researchers across Africa could leverage this infrastructure to access different kinds of services. And apart from putting those frameworks in place, they also put out training for the NRENs across Africa, and EcoConnect was a beneficiary of some of the training that was being provided. And so with the help of, in particular, WACREN and GIANT, we were able to establish the Nigerian Identity Federation. We usually refer to it as eduid.ng. So as the slides basically say, it addresses some of the issues from management from a user perspective and gives wider access to services that are available globally, and also the ability for institutions to share and collaborate on services that they might have. With the Nigerian Identity Federation, we're able to make an application to EduGain, and EduGain is a kind of global federation of federations where there are lots of services for the research and education community. So we made an application to EduGain to become part of the EduGain Federation, and that was accepted. And so eduid.ng became a member of the EduGain family, so to speak. So we were very pleased. About that, and we're very pleased about that. That we were now able to offer to our community not just the ability to offer local services, but even global services that are available. But in this game of that we're in being able to deliver infrastructure and solutions for our community, when you solve one level, it's like a video game. You solve one level of challenges and kill the gremlins on level 1, and you get to level 2, and then there are a whole set of new challenges that need to be addressed. So as we started using the Nigerian Identity Federation, we came across other challenges. And these challenges were that the identity federations presume that our campuses have robust campus management systems where user information is housed and a source of trust is actually able to be utilized. But as we started using our federation, we realized that literally all our campuses did not have a single source of truth, a single source of where users were. The registry department had some data, the library had others, the ICT unit had other data, and so it was really became a challenge to effectively grow the Identity Federation and utilize all the wonderful services that are available in EduGain, and to really leverage the promise that EduID, Federated EduID brings. So it was a challenge for us. And in terms of being able to deal with that, you know, the campuses or the universities were saying, oh, well, can you come and help us to build some LDAP-based system where we can actually aggregate all our users together and come up with something that works? And really, we didn't have the resource or the expertise to be able to do that. And I think that other NRENs across the region would have had similar challenges. But we started to talk to a local technology company in Nigeria, the DataSphere Solutions. They're focused on building open source based software using open technologies. And they had this identity and access management platform called BonafID. And we quickly realized that we could actually use the infrastructure they had to sort of build a robust platform that could be used to sort of augment the functionality of the Nigerian Identity Federation. So I think the slide is trying to actually show what the benefits were going to be by leveraging BonafID as part of our identity and access management platform. So what then happened was that there's a university in northern Nigeria, Usmanu Danfodio University. They got a grant essentially to build some virtual lab infrastructure. They wanted to see how they could use virtual labs and e-learning platforms to deliver virtual learning for some scientific courses. And Usman Danfodio University was leading a consortium of 3 universities to be able to deliver this project. The ICT directors quickly realized that in order to effectively deploy this solution, they were going to need to leverage education identity and a robust campus identity access management system. So they did approach EcoConnect about implementing this, and we said, well, we can work with the university to do this using BonafID as the IAM platform. So that diagram just gives a high level overview of what we were trying to achieve. On your left-hand side, you can see the 3 universities that are involved in this project, and the idea is to actually aggregate the user data from each of those universities into the BonafID identity management platform, and that's so we have all the users there. The EduID identity is generated within the platform, and that information is federated to eduid.ng, which is the Identity Federation, and in order to access some of the key services that the project needed to use, which included EduRoam, Zoom, an e-learning Moodle, and the actual virtual lab that's being developed. So the implementation, I'm just using some basic color coding to show the implementation of the project where we're at the moment. The green just shows what we've actually done, and then the amber is sort of depicting the current work that's actually going on the campus. The schedule for this is that we want to actually have Bonafide deployed and the project all working by the summer. But I'm sure many of you are watching the series called the Nigerian elections, and that's had to slow us down a little bit because of the elections taking place in Nigeria at the moment. Most campuses are kind of shut down. So some of the activities we're actually embarked on are taking a bit longer than expected, but we're still hoping to be on track to have everything in place by the summer. So the idea is that we'll have all the users onboarded into Bonafide, and then we can actually leverage this platform to deliver real robust solution for this project. Now, what we've done is we want to use this project as a demonstrator, and in doing that, we're hoping that the success of this project will mean that we can actually use this infrastructure of Bonafide and EduID as a REN service. I'm aware that the authors of Bonafide have also worked on a translation version into French, so that French-based NRENs can also leverage the platform. So the beauty as well of the platform, Bonafide platform, is that although it generates a primary identifier of EduID, it can actually incorporate other affiliate identifiers such as ORCID, so that if we're leveraging Bonafide and users have ORCID IDs as well, we can actually use the infrastructure to leverage ORCID ID and other mature persistent identifiers in deployment or access to different services, particularly in our case, open science infrastructure. So, like I said, this is all part of a PID strategy that we have. LibSense have initiated an African PID strategy, and obviously using EduID with Bonafide actually dovetails quite nicely into the PID strategy. So I'm open, I recognize it's a rather technical presentation, but again, like I said, there are some banners in the foyer that really depicts this infrastructure and the benefits to users, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions here or on a one-to-one basis. The final slide just shows essentially the technical partners that are responsible for building this platform. So from the Bonafide perspective, you can contact them or get more information from the link in this slide. So thank you very much. So,
thank you, Owen. And at least I learned something that I didn't know before. I thought that eco was to be green, but I learned that that is another name for Lagos. So that's a win already. We have time for a few questions. It will eat into the rest of the session. I've been told we have to finish in 10 minutes or so. Otherwise we don't get lunch, and well, while that may be good for me, maybe that's not for all of you. So are there any questions for Owen? None. It was very clear. I give you that. So thank you again, Owen. So that leaves us a few minutes to give you the opportunity to raise any issues that you see. Maybe I'll start with asking for a show of hands. Who of you has an EduRoam account? So, of those people that don't put up their hand, why not? Is anyone wanting to comment on that? What stops you from doing it? Sorry, you were behind the camera. I didn't see you immediately.
Hello, my name is Nina Chachu. I'm from Ashesi University here in Ghana. The reason I don't have an EduRoam ID is that my institution has wavered as to whether it should have EduRoam and shouldn't. And at the moment we don't, but we're working on it.
Good, thank you. In fact, what you raise is I think one of the main problems with federated identity in general. It benefits kind of from the network effect. The more participate, the more useful it becomes. And as I always say, the first person that bought a telephone was an idiot, because he spent a lot of money and could not talk to anyone. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg. The same goes for identity federations. I always get a question, and what are all the services that I can access? But there are no services before you get started, and I think Owen alluded to that when he talked about all the services you get through EduGain. And I was wondering if this is an area where eduid.africa could also play a role by providing identities for those that would like to use EduRoam at least outside their own institution. But I think that's a question for WACREN to answer. Omo, you want to comment on that? Yes. Does that work?
I was just about to say that, that's, well, not surprising, you're the inventor of EduRoam, so you would know exactly how to deploy this. But yes, that's the whole point. So we sort of have spawned out eduid.africa. And what eduid.africa is doing is working on two fronts. On one front is helping countries to build up their own national identity federations. On the other front, we have launched a catch-all identity federation for countries that don't have EduID or EduRoam or that kind of infrastructure, so they can immediately use EduRoam and EduID. Now, what Bonafide is providing is, because although we can federate the identities, quite a number of campuses in Africa don't have good identity and access management systems. So Bonafide completes that chain, so they don't need to have any other infrastructure to use EduRoam and EduID.
Thank you, Omo. And let me say that I think the eduid.africa is really a fantastic initiative. It's also really great to see how the regional RENs got together and did this for the whole of Africa, not just for one region. Are there other questions in the meanwhile? Going once? Leila.
Owen raised the problem of the single source of truth and the challenge that actually we assume in Europe that federations is easy because we most likely have in Western Europe single source of truth. What is it? How is it taking? Well, how is that a challenge in different countries in different contexts? And is that really the major problem towards access to federations and let's say deployment of federations? Thank you.
Yeah, there wasn't really enough time to elaborate on all of that. But in our experience in trying to deploy at various campuses, then you get into the campuses and you say, okay, where's your user data? You know, the assumption for us is that the bursary, the registry would house all that information, because the point of entry for onboarding of students, particularly students, is through the registry. And similarly, we'd think that staff as well would be onboarded into the institution through registry. But what you find is that you have the registry onboarding, and outsourcing part of that to the ICT unit. Then you have library doing their own independent registration of users, and different departments onboard their own users. So they're not utilizing a central source to deliver whatever function that they provide. It's a bit surprising because it's really a basic concept that you use the same source of data to deliver the different things. But we realize that's not the case. And even where it is the case, the roles of the users is not clearly defined, so you can't distinguish between a 100-level student, a 400-level student, a member of staff. So all the data and the roles are not really well categorized. And so, you're coming with identity federation, which is not so much of a problem for some services, but then when you want to use platforms that want to know who you are, give you authorization as to what you can do, and then some of the commercial negotiations you want to get into to get discounts on maybe access to resources like library databases, then if there's any suspicion that your underlying source of integrity isn't very succinct, then the model falls over. And that was for us why we really needed something like Bonafide. So it's quite prevalent with our campuses, certainly in Nigeria, but I suspect it's the case across the continent.
Yeah, if I can add something to that, I completely agree with everything what you said, and this is kind of the history of federated identity in general, moving away from having user data in many places with all the hassle with updating that and keeping it up to date. When someone leaves, for instance, you don't want to have to revoke rights in 300 individual systems. So that led to the creation of enterprise directories and single sign-on inside the organization. And as we talked about before, with our world increasingly becoming global and our collaboration spanning institutions, it becomes more and more important that we apply those same principles, having data about users only at one place, and at the place that is responsible for it and knows how accurate it is, becomes increasingly important. The one dimension I would want to add to that is the dimension of privacy and security. Increasingly, it becomes important that we are careful about how we deal with personal data of users. And I was going to say in Europe, but I think GDPR has global implications. With things like GDPR, it becomes important to make sure that user data is protected. And if you have somebody's personal data at 100 different places, if you have personal data about users at organizations that have no direct relation with those users, that becomes increasingly problematic. And from a security point of view, it also means that a breach anywhere in those, I don't know how many places where the user data is, can cause problems, ripple-on effects all over the world potentially. So I think where federation and federated identity started as a way to scale and to manage users and manage churn of users, it's becoming more and more an indispensable tool for dealing with how we do our business, education, research, etc. And I think that is why, well, you may have guessed that I'm excited about trust and identity topics, but I think so should you. I think this is really where things are happening at the moment and where you have to take part. Stepping off my pedestal, in the interest of time, I want to thank you, audience, all for participating, for asking good questions, for being here. even maybe a bit hungry by now. And I would like to ask for a final round of applause for the panelists that did a great job. Thank you also on my behalf, and see you after lunch.
All right. Hello? 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 Okay, so thank you very much, class. Thank you, panel members. It's now time for us to go for lunch. The lunch will be held in this room. So this, if you're sitting here to your left, but to my right. And this is how we're going to do it. The ushers are going to lead us to the room. But there is a gentleman in front there who will be looking out for your lunch chit or your badge. So if you have a lunch chit, please, you can proceed first to the place, and then every other person who has a badge can follow. So please, if you have a lunch chit, you can proceed to the lunch place. And then we'll come back here maybe in about 30 minutes maximum for session 2 for the day. So please, session 1 has ended and we're going for lunch. If you don't have a lunch sheet, you need to go for a lunch sheet if you have to go for it. And I guess you understand, those who have registered and paid or on complimentary pass. So is the room right here? So you can just proceed out of the door and then.
Operating your own business takes time, passion, and hard work. It takes commitment and perseverance in the face of challenges. As an entrepreneur, I look for value. How to get more for less. That is what Vodafone Too Much Business gives. Too much data, minutes for calls, SMS bundles, and my favorite part is too much flexibility to customize your mobile plan.
Get more value for your business. Sign on to Vodafone Too Much Business, a cost-efficient mobile offer that allows you to choose and customize how much data, voice or SMS allocations your business needs. Send start to 050-777-9000 or email vodafonebusiness.gh@vodafone.com.
Whatever your business needs are, Vodafone Too Much Business has a solution for you.